Weather station reports clear skies for the window. All systems are currently green.
Roger that. Tracking confirms stable trajectory.
For 40 minutes, 4 human beings were the loneliest people in history. No Earth, no radio, no rescue. Just the moon between them and home, and a silence so complete it felt alive. That is the moment most videos skip. But it is the moment that makes Artemis 2 matter. Because this was not just another launch, and not just another lap around the moon. It was the first time in more than half a century that people left Earth and went back toward our nearest world with human eyes, human memory, and human judgment leading the way. And what they saw from that distance did not merely confirm what our cameras already knew. It changed the story. The mission began on April 1st, 2026, with 4 people climbing into NASA's most ambitious spacecraft. Commander Raid Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Koch, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, the first Canadian to travel so close to the moon. Beneath them sat the European Service Module, built in Germany and tied into the mission's power, propulsion, and life support. The spacecraft had a name chosen for a reason: integrity. That name was not branding. It was a statement. This mission was built on cooperation across agencies, nations, and continents. It was proof that the next chapter of lunar exploration would not belong to one flag alone. At 6:35 p.m., the Space Launch System lifted off from Kennedy Space Center and climbed into the Florida sky. NASA's most powerful rocket had spent months under pressure, dealing with leaks, tests, rollbacks, and repairs. So when the engines lit and the stack rose cleanly, it felt less like a routine launch and more like a controlled release of years of tension. A minor issue with the flight termination system delayed the departure only briefly, and then Integrity was on her way. 8.5 minutes later, the main engines cut off and the crew entered orbit. That pause in Earth orbit was not just a technical checkpoint. It was the first real breath of the mission. The first moment where everyone could see if this spacecraft built for the moon was actually acting like one. And yeah, that is where things got interesting in a very human way. The systems check turned up little problems. The toilet was not fully cooperating. The email system was acting up too. Funny, sure, but also not really, because spaceflight is never only about the big dramatic stuff. It is about the fan working, the tools working, the cabin holding together for 10 days without turning into a problem of its own. That is the part Artemis 2 quietly reminded everybody. Even the most advanced machine ever sent toward the moon still has to deal with ordinary human messiness. And sometimes that is the story. Then came the burn that set everything in motion. Ground controllers cleared Integrity for the Trans-Lunar injection maneuver, the engine firing that sent the spacecraft from Earth orbit onto a path toward the moon. After that moment, there was no casual turning back. The crew was committed to a free return trajectory, a route shaped by gravity itself, where the Earth and the moon would do most of the steering. The journey became quieter, slower, and far more beautiful. At about 100,000 miles from Earth, the crew turned their cameras homeward and captured a frame that has already become one of the mission's defining images. Hello World. A wide-angle view of the entire planet suspended in darkness. The bright curve of sunlight begins to touch the horizon, while the night side of Earth is faintly illuminated by moonlight bouncing back from the lunar surface. It is the kind of image that looks almost unreal until you remember that it is not a composite. It is one shot, one lens, one moment. And that is where the mission stopped being about hardware and started becoming about perception. Cameras are impressive, but they are not eyes. Christina Koch and her crewmates were seeing things with a range of brightness and color that no digital sensor can fully reproduce. Human vision does not merely record, it interprets. It catches subtle shifts in shade, texture, and depth that instruments flatten into data. The moon, from their perspective, was not the blank gray sphere we see from Earth. It had dimension, it had nuance, it had tone. Koch described fresh impact craters as bright punctures in the surface, almost like holes punched through a sheet. And then came the more surprising observation: the moon was not just gray. The crew noticed browns. They noticed a faint green in some areas. Those colors may sound small, even poetic, but in science, small details often matter most. If astronauts can describe what the eye sees where cameras struggle, then future missions gain another layer of information that no robot can quite replace. And then there was Carol. As Integrity passed near the moon, the crew spotted two previously unidentified craters. One was proposed to be named Integrity, a fitting marker for the mission and the spacecraft. The other was a bright feature on the boundary between the near side and the far side of the moon. Reid Wiseman proposed calling it Carol in memory of his late wife, who died in 2020. That is the kind of detail that changes the tone of the entire mission, because suddenly this is no longer just an engineering story or a geopolitical story or a story about lunar mapping. It becomes a story about memory, about how even at 240,000 miles from home, a person can take grief, transform it into meaning, and leave a name on another world. If approved, that crater will enter the scientific record. But long before any formal naming process is complete, it already carries its real significance. A reminder that exploration is never only about distance. It is also about what humans choose to carry with them. As the spacecraft closed in on the moon, the crew crossed into a world most people have never truly seen. We call it the dark side, but that is a mistake. It is not dark. It gets sunlight just like the side facing us. The difference is that it always faces away from Earth. Tidal locking has tied the moon's rotation to its orbit so that only one side is visible from the ground. Satellites have mapped the far side in incredible detail. But maps are not the same as standing there with your own eyes and watching the terrain pass beneath you in real time. The near side of the moon is marked by the large, dark plains of ancient volcanic rock. Those broad patches are the frozen remains of a past when lava once flooded enormous basins. The far side tells a different story. It has fewer of those volcanic plains and far more craters, ridges, and rough terrain. One of the great unsolved mysteries in lunar science is why the volcanic activity concentrated so heavily on the Earth-facing side. Artemis 2 did not solve that mystery, but it gave scientists a closer look at the terrain where the answer may eventually be found. The crew also photographed the Terminator line, that razor boundary where daylight meets night on the moon. That is where the landscape becomes dramatic in a way no overhead map can capture. Shadows go black, ridges jump into relief. Craters look deeper, peaks look sharper. What seemed flat from orbit turns out to be rugged, layered, and steep. That matters more than people realize, because future Artemis landings are not going to look like Apollo. Apollo landed near the equator on relatively smoother near-side terrain. Artemis is headed toward the South Polar regions, including the South Pole, Aitken Basin, where the land is rougher, more complex, and much harder to navigate. The crew's in-person observations are already helping NASA understand what that terrain actually feels like from the cockpit window, not just on a computer screen. Then came one of the mission's most extraordinary moments. As the moon moved between Integrity and Earth, the laser communications link was cut off. 40 minutes of total silence. Mission Control could not hear them. They could not hear Mission Control. 4 human beings were alone on the far side of the moon, moving in a silence so complete it might as well have been ancient. That is the kind of moment people remember forever. When the signal returned, they witnessed Earthrise, a scene made legendary by Apollo 8 on Christmas Eve in 1968. But now it belonged to a new generation. Their planet rose over the moon's horizon, blue and fragile and distant. Then, later in the mission, they saw something almost nobody has ever seen from that viewpoint, a total solar eclipse from the far side of the moon. From Earth, the moon and sun appear nearly the same size during an eclipse. But from space, near the moon, the geometry changes. The moon occupies more of the sky. The eclipse lasted nearly 54 minutes. Stars appeared. planets appeared. The darkness was deep enough that the universe beyond the sun became visible. For a brief period, the crew witnessed the moon against a background of celestial lights that simply cannot be seen during most lunar visits. That is why people asking, "Why do moon photos never show stars?" are missing the point. The stars are always there. The sun usually washes them out. Remove the glare, and the sky returns. After the lunar flyby, the crew turned for home. The return was not gentle. Re-entry is one of the most dangerous phases of any mission. The capsule had to hit the atmosphere at exactly the right angle. Too shallow, and it could skip back into space. Too steep, and the heat would become overwhelming. As integrity descended at roughly 32 times the speed of sound, the air in front of the capsule compressed violently and turned into plasma, a superheated, electrically charged state of matter that wrapped the vehicle in fire and blocked communications for several minutes. For 6 minutes, mission control had nothing but waiting. Then the signal came back and the room exhaled. Parachutes deployed. Speed dropped. And just like that, integrity stopped being a machine coming home from the edge of the moon and became something slower, heavier, more human. At 5:07 p.m., off the coast of San Diego, the capsule hit the Pacific and settled into the water. 5 helium balloons popped out from the nose to keep her steady in the waves. Simple, almost ridiculous looking. But it worked. There was one last problem, because of course there was. Wiseman could hear the rescue crew, but they could not hear him back properly, so the boats just circled for a bit, waiting like the whole ocean had paused. Then came the front porch, that inflatable recovery platform attached to the capsule. Fresh air, real air, the kind the crew had not breathed in over a week. 4 Navy officers helped them out one by one. Capsule to raft, raft to helicopter, helicopter to ship, medical checks, quiet faces, tired bodies, and that was it. The mission ended the way good exploration stories do. Not with glory, really. With careful hands, a safe return, and people finally back where they belonged. But the real meaning of Artemis 2 is not the splashdown. It is the change in perspective. This mission was not a landing, but it was a reconnaissance mission in the most human sense possible. It gave NASA observations no satellite could fully replace. It showed that the moon's surface is more complex than it looks from far away. It revealed colors, textures, shadows, and geological features that only people can describe with depth. It proved that future lunar exploration will require not just better machines, but better understanding of the terrain those machines will face. And it reminded us why human beings keep going back. Not because the moon is easy. Not because the math is simple. Not because the risks are small. We go because we are the kind of species that sees a distant landscape and wants to name it. We go because we understand that a place becomes more real when a human being looks at it and says, "I was there." We go because even in the coldest vacuum, a person can carry love, memory, and purpose far enough to leave them on another world. Carol will not be the last name we place on the moon. It will not be the last crater. It will not be the last mission. It will not be the last time human beings stare into that pale, ancient surface and see something worth reaching for. Artemis 2 was not the ending. It was the proof that the next chapter has already begun. Hey folks, if you are enjoying this deep dive into the engineering of Artemis, hit the subscribe button. We are tracking every major mission this decade.